Hey, pioneers! Welcome to episode number 474. Today's episode, I'm going to be walking you guys through my experience of going on back to the frontier, what that process looked like, as well as uh, my reaction to the first episode. So I wasn't really able to talk about anything when it was happening because I had to sign non-disclosures. So that meant, and I still have to be careful with what I share so that I don't accidentally share anything before it airs, so that I don't spoil any episodes or anything like that. So I was first contacted back at the beginning actually of 2024. So it was, I think around January or February, I got an email and asked if I had any type of interest that they were doing a show. And it was a bit vague even at that point on just the very light premise of the show and if I would, was any interest at all. And I said, sure, like I'd love to hear a little bit more about it. I thought the premise was intriguing of having families go back and live like it was in the 1880s. So there was quite a few different emails back and forth as of the timing of when the filming was going to begin got shifted a little bit. It got pushed back a little bit later into the summer. And so there was a lot of Zoom meetings of meeting with the producers. I never had any personal interactions with Chip and Joanna Gaines. That's been something people have asked me quite a few times. They did visit set once, but it was not when I was there during filming, and everything else was with the production company. So I was, looking at the times that I would have to be on set if it met at all with our schedule, as well as the travel. So it was filmed in the Northern Rockies and it was filmed on 10,000 acres. It was actually a beautiful area. And it really was far, out from the city, a huge property. Drove out gravel roads and crossed a running creek to get to where it was being filmed. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So let me back up. So after we went through what my role would be as a homestead mentor, not as obviously part of the families or cast that would be on set the entire time. Kind of the role that I would play was more on the homesteading part, but especially on filling the pantry and that type of expertise, which fit very well. That's what we do in real life. I've written books on it and taught on that subject for a really, really long time. So as everything looked like it would work out with dates and all of those types of things, then I had to do a couple of different Zooms where it was kind of like a test to see like how you interacted with people, what you would be like on camera. They looked at my YouTube channel and podcast. And then it came down to it, and they actually sent a videographer out to my homestead to do basically it was like a test screening, test filming. So it was really interesting. Something that someone else has asked me is, were the lines scripted? Like, did I have to memorize lines as part of the production? And the answer to that is no. However, there were specific facts or things in scenes that needed to be conveyed. So it was super interesting when they sent the person out. They said we're going to have him come out and film, but they needed somebody else to be on camera because they wanted to see, obviously from my YouTube videos, they could see how I was on camera, but that wasn't interacting very much with other people because a lot of what I do is teaching on our homestead, but not with, my husband works a full-time day job and my son is now out of the house, and my teen daughter, sometimes she comes on camera, but not very often. So they really wanted to see what I was like on camera while interacting with other people. So my sister-in-law and niece, and they said like this will never air. It's literally just a testing, that type of thing. So they came over, but I couldn't tell them much other than I need you guys to come over. You'll be on camera. We'll be interacting like out with the chickens and going down to where the cows are and that type of thing. I need you guys to ask me questions and I'll kind of mentor you, even though they do have cattle themselves. But I couldn't tell them any specifics. So they were troopers. They came over for the day. but the interesting thing about that was ahead of time, I didn't realize until the videographer got here that there were certain lines, and a lot of it was like historical facts, I should say. And they wanted to see if I could remember historical facts or specific facts that needed to be in reference to what was going on, if I could recite those pretty quick and pretty easily and remember them and have it. I'm assuming they were looking to see if it would flow naturally. So I wasn't even allowed to see what the facts were. And for me, if I can read something, I have really good reading retention. I love to read. I can read really fast and I can retain what I read really easily. That's been a gift that the Lord has given me. But he just was verbally saying, like, I need you to state the fact that in the 1880s that there was approximately, I don't remember the exact fact now, it was well over a year ago, but so many thousands of acres were homesteaded during this time frame, and stating those years, that type of thing. But he just verbally told it to me once and then was like, and go. And I had to kind of work it into this. And so that was actually difficult for me because I kept saying, can I just see the paper? Like, I needed to read it. Obviously, they didn't want a paper in my hands. They wanted to see if I could do it. So that was kind of probably the most challenging part of the actual screen test. And then, so we filmed all of that, and then that went off and had to be viewed by everybody. And then they came back and said, okay, but you passed. And we'd love to have you come on and to be the host. And so once that, or not host, but mentor. So once that was established, then it was nailing down exact dates that I would be there for specific filming periods, because I wasn't on set the whole time. There's no way with a functioning homestead and family that I could be gone for that period of time. So it was going through schedules and getting that all in, and then we moved forward. So there were times where there'd be like a lot of back and forth, and then there wouldn't really be anything, and then boom, like hitting the next spot. So one of the interesting things was I had to send ahead pictures of the clothes that I was going to wear when I was on set for the episodes and the filming. And so it was my own clothes, but they had to basically get approved, which was really interesting. So I sent several different options, and most of them, if you've watched episode 1, you've seen like that was just me with a white shirt, my overalls, and then a denim layer, because where we were filming high up in the mountains, even in the middle of summer, mornings could be cold, evenings could be cold, lots of bugs, but then the days could be hot. So obviously wearing lots of layers there. But it was interesting. I'd never had to do an outfit approval in that manner. And so they ended up liking the much more muted colors. So whites and blues, denim. I had these really bright, and I love them, these bright berry overalls. They're like a bright berry color. They're one of my favorites, and they're super comfortable. That was too bold. So that was very interesting. And so I sent those in, and they're like, okay, this one and this one and this one is approved. So that's not anything I had ever had to have approval for on the outfits, but it was all my clothes. There was no budget. It was just things that were from my own wardrobe, that type of thing. So what was really interesting, though, is I knew there was going to be 3 families, but I had no input on who the families were. I didn't know who the families were, had no idea of family size. I knew families, but I didn't know like age range of children, where the families were coming from. None of that I was privy to beforehand or had any hand in any of that choosing. So when I went up for the first filming, I was there for 2 days. The first day was just getting on set, and I actually got to tour all of the cabins before the actual families arrived on set. So I went to the cabins, got to see them, and they truly were in rough shape. I mean, they were dirty. If you watched episode 1, which at the time of this recording has already aired, you could see there was One of the cabins didn't have a front wall. Another one of the cabins, there was no front steps. And so you had to really like climb up and lunge because there was like two steps and they were pretty good steps in order to get into the house. There was only one door. And so the steps were all broken and there were holes in the walls. There were holes in all of the cabin's walls, but one had broken steps on the entry. And then the other, Stacy Loper, their cabin didn't even have a front wall. And really, it was bugs. I mean, if you've ever heard people talk about, the mosquitoes, or if you've ever went into the woods and the mountains during summertime, the mosquitoes can be fierce. I mean, the bugs are something else. And so bugs are attracted to light. And of course, they were looking at 1880s, so they did have lanterns and candles, but that was it. And so if you have those lit in a cabin at night, bugs are attracted to that. And they're attracted to obviously mosquitoes. Well, they don't need light to find you, but you're going to have a lot of bugs. And so if you have a lot of holes in the walls, that can make for actually a very unpleasant experience because you're going to have a ton of bugs. The Hall's cabin had some loose boards and holes, but it didn't have the steps on the front broken or missing the front wall, but they all were really dirty and everybody had outhouses. So the first day there, I got to walk through and see those, and then the root cellars. So the root cellars was really cool because every cabin had a root cellar. And if you watched episode 1, you got to see that and see them. But what was really interesting is, depending on which cabin it was, one of them was dug into the bank, which would be more like a traditional root cellar would be, where it was obviously underground or into a bank, more surrounded by earth. And that's to help maintain the temperature more evenly, keep it from freezing in the wintertime, but obviously keeping it cool during the summertime. But then the other two locations, one of them was like halfway into a bank. It wasn't as big of a hill. So the bottom portion, probably like about 2 feet, was in a bank, and then the rest was up top. But the Loper's root cellar, they didn't really have a bank where their cabin was. And so theirs was set into the tree line to provide as much shade as possible. And it might have been dug down just a little bit, but I'm trying to remember on theirs, maybe like a foot, not very much. But the interesting part is they were done really thickly with logs and moss, and they had roots. They were very cool to walk into, even though they weren't, the Lopers wasn't dug all the way into the ground. It was amazing though, because there were days, some of those days we were there, it was hot. I mean, you had some days that were, in the 90s, and you would walk into the root cellar and it was noticeably cooler, like significantly cooler. And so that was really fun, just to see that you could have a climate controlled, even in summer heat, even without having a perfect fully into the hill or fully dug down into the earth all the way. It still offered quite a bit of temperature control, and it was a lot cooler. So that was exciting for me because we do not have a root cellar, and there's been a lot of places on our property where we've thought about putting a root cellar. It doesn't just work. And I'm like, if it's in the shade line where it stays in the deep shade all the time and the walls are really thick, and even if you go somewhat down, it definitely did provide coolness. That was really fun for me. So I got to go through and see all of those things ahead of time. And so that was day one of just getting really familiar with the set, the proximity of everything, meeting the actual film crew, that type of thing, the producers in person. And then day 2 is what you saw on camera if you watched episode 1. So that was actually my first time meeting any of the families, getting to see anybody and who was chosen as the families. And my very first interaction with them was what you saw on camera when we came up with the wagons and the horses, and brought them their wagons. And then they went from the land office to their actual individual cabins. what was interesting about that for me is, for those of you who don't know, I actually grew up with horses. So I was in 4-H. I did the Western Games and barrel racing and did our local play days and those types of things. Had horses all the way up through the birth of my daughter. And would get green broke horses or sometimes unbroke horses, would do some of the groundwork, and then have someone just saddle break them to being a green broke horse, which means they were broke to saddle, but they needed a lot of refinement. And so horses were actually a big part of my life for decades. And then once my daughter was born, so 16 years ago, she was 6 months old, and that's when I had my last horse. Or it's been 16 years since I've had a horse, but they're very much, I love horses. Um, Once you've had horses like that, man, they're in your blood. I love to ride. So it was really fun because first day on set, they have all of the wagons that you saw there are 3 wagons with a 2-team horse that were pulling them. But then I don't think that it really showed it on camera much, but they also had wranglers, so individual riders on the horses in case something happened and, a horse in the wagons like had a stampede or broke out, or just safety wise, they had extra riders on horseback that were kind of at the peripheral view. I don't think the camera really showed it very much. So that was fun because I got to go down and meet the wranglers and meet the drivers and say hello to the horses and hang out with them. So that was a blast. And we actually were waiting in the wagon. I was with the head driver before we could come up because the families didn't know that they were going to get to go with horses on wagons. And so we had to stay like out of sight until so that everything obviously could be captured on camera. And so I actually got to sit with the driver in the wagon, and we got to talk about, training and the horses. And that part was really fun. We were on a really steep hill though. And so it had the brake on the wagon. Horses did awesome. So it was really fun when we kind of came up and over that. Was exhilarating and really fun. But I was there for 2 days, and it was so funny to see. I didn't get to preview any of the episodes, so I had no idea. I still have no idea as the rest of the episodes come out, like what from actually when I was there filming, what's going to actually make it onto the episode and on the screen. So if you watched episode 1, I had maybe 2 to 3 minutes at total time on screen. And yet I was there for 2 days on set for those 2 to 3 minutes. So the editors, oh my goodness, like have to take all of that footage and have to edit that down into something that is, intriguing, knowing what to cut, what to keep. The mass amount of footage that they have to go through to edit is, oh my, I can't even imagine. It's huge. So what was really, as it aired, is I did not see, of course, the families' reactions to their cabins when I knew what they looked like, but I wasn't there when they were entering them and seeing them for the first time, or their first night there with the dinner and seeing the outhouse and what really the conditions were like. I didn't get to see any of that. I came back, which would be for I'm not actually sure if it's the 2nd or 3rd episode, depending on how it got edited. But then I came back. Now, one of the things that I said, it was my parting farewell remark in episode 1, was watch out for bears. So that was a very real thing. There was a bear that morning when I came on set, and one of the crew actually had went outside and saw the bear. It was like, oh, and then, the bear went off. It was a black bear. And so then it was a thing like, oh, like nobody, don't go off into the edge of the woods by yourself, having bear spray. And so there were a couple of times throughout the entire time that different members of the production crew, I don't know if the families ever did, but I was, talking with the different videographers and cameraman and sound men and stuff, and they did see some bears on site. So that was actually a real thing. Like, hey, there's bears and wild animals out here. So it wasn't just saying it for like fun or for the camera. There actually were bears on site the first day. And there was an actual working cattle ranch as well. So I don't know if that has made it into any of the episodes, but there was lots of cows as you were coming in. You would see the different fields and get to see them as you were driving out to go to the where the cabins were. So that, of course, I enjoyed because, horses and cows, I'm a very happy girl if those are around. One of the things on Back to the Frontier that the families have to do is fill their winter pantry. That is also one of the things that we like to do is to fill our winter pantry. However, we can't grow everything. You can't grow everything. So for the things that we can't grow, and when I'm looking for my preserving supplies, especially the Azure canning jars, I've got ball canning jars, I've got Kerr canning jars, and I tell you what, when it comes to purchasing new canning jars, the Azure canning jars are hands down my favorite. If I have to purchase new jars, they're the only jars that I use anymore. And they brought back the 1.5 pints, which is one of my favorite sizes. They're the straight up wide mouth lid. Ball discontinued them several years ago, but I love the 1.5 pint size for doing pickled asparagus and tomato sauce. It's like the perfect amount of tomato sauce for our family. And it's really great for packing in the spears of asparagus because they're just tall and skinny. So it's all I usually do my pickled asparagus in. And the quality of their glass canning jars is like okay, for all of my peeps who've been canning for a while, or if you got older canning jars, you know what I'm talking about. The Azure canning jars glass is the thick glass. It's like the heavy duty that canning jars used to be made of. So if you can't tell, I really love their canning jars and that they have the 1.5 size, but they have a plethora of other things. So for our sugar, flour, I'm not growing my own wheat. I use them for that. We use them for all of our fat sources. So what we're not getting from our own animals, so tallow from the cows, I get my olive oil from them. I know that I'm getting real, not fraudulent, extra virgin olive oil. I get my coconut oil from them, our avocado oil. I get my soy sauce from them. I know that the products that I'm getting from them have been ethically sourced, and I can get everything in one place for a really good buy and in bulk. Now, they do have small versions, so you can try something out, see how you like it, and then buy it in the larger versions. And one of my other favorite things is for things like vinegar. I do get my vinegar from them, but as well as the olive oil and the fat, is you can actually get them in glass jars. We have way too many things in plastics. We've got so much microplastics in our systems, it's not even funny. So I love that I actually have the option of purchasing food in glass jars, and I can find that from Azure. I can't always find that on store shelves for different things. Plus, if you use coupon code Melissa15, you can get 15% off your first time customer order of $100 or more. That's Melissa15 at azurestandard.com. But one of the things why this is, like, why would I want to be a part of a docuseries or a reality TV show and that type of thing? And I shared a little bit about that in the episode and the interview I did with Stacy, who was one of the wives and the families that was on the show last week. If you missed that, you can go back and catch that one. She had some great insights on what she learned and her experience throughout it. But it's a social experiment. And some of the things that I've seen that people said is like, well, maybe this wasn't exactly like the 1880s and that. And it's a show that was taking modern people, and obviously people who do not have or did not have at the time really any country homestead farming living experience. Stacy's husband, the Lopers, him and her mother-in-law, so his mom, had grown up some on a farm, and so they had a little bit of experience, but them together, like as a family unit, and the other families, they don't live in the country. They don't practice any of the modern homesteading stuff or live rurally or any of those types of things. So it was very much culture shock as well. And the premise or the point is to see when electricity is taken away, when electronics are taken away, there is no internet, all of that, like as making it as close to the 1880s as possible, but also keeping in mind these are modern families, with kids. However, they were, to my knowledge, on set the entire time, meaning they didn't like leave at night and go stay in hotels. They didn't ever get to go off site. So they truly were in this secluded location where they had interaction with the other families. Of course, myself, when I would come to visit, and the historian Jacob, and then the film crew and production crew. But that was it. It wasn't like they were going to stores and seeing, you know going off site during it. It truly was this isolated experience. And it's not like cameras went off and then everything was normal modern living, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And when I was on set, there was no electricity even out there, so it was porta potties where the crew area was. And then when you were down at the cabins, if you needed to use the restroom, you were literally just using the outhouses, which I'm very familiar with. There's an outhouse at my dad's property, and went camping, and even just out and about on acreage, there's not always a bathroom within walking distance, so you figure out how to go behind a tree really easy. So all of that was genuine. I think people were asking, or kind of wondering about that. But I really wanted to see personally, I think most of us who are in homesteading or are attracted to this way of life to one degree or another, we kind of wonder, like, or I've said this myself, maybe you've had this sentiment, like sometimes I feel like I'm just was born in the wrong century. Like I really feel like I should have been born in the 1800s. Like how cool that would have been. And yet we say that, and even myself living very rurally and going without power for 2 weeks. The longest we've ever went without power, had a power outage, was 2 weeks. But 2 to 3 day stints is very, very normal for us to lose power. And our whole heat is wood heat only, and so building a fire every morning to heat the house, knowing and cooking on wood heat, is something that's very normal to me. So in comparison to most, I would say, of Western society, I probably have more skill sets, and I'm used to some of those elements than a lot of people are. And yet we're in this modern age. I deliver podcast episodes because of the internet. I'm able to connect and teach and be in community with so many of you because of the internet. And I look things up on the internet. I have learned things just like you from the internet. In fact, Carolyn Thomas from Homesteading family, and many of you know Carolyn is my best friend. We met online and then became friends in real person, but she lives in a completely different state than me, and we talk every single day. But the way that we get to do that is from, now you could do it with a landline, obviously, but it's with the electronic device. And so even that, if you were to strip all of that away and not have access to any of that, yes, I absolutely could survive and know what to do, and I have the skill sets. However, for an extended period of time, most of us have never experienced that, and we don't actually know fully how that would impact us emotionally, especially society, if society was going through all of that as a whole. And so for me, I'm like, this is an opportunity at least to see how three families, what this experience is going to be like for them in an actual social experiment. Now, of course, there was children there, and so it was a controlled environment and that type of thing. But I was very honestly intrigued and curious to see what it would be like, how the families would do. And if you watched episode 1, like their first day there was definitely emotional impact for them. And Stacy especially, like she was really honest and open about how, and again, we'll link to that episode if you didn't watch it, where she shares in her own words on the podcast, and you can also watch the episode as well on the actual show. But she said that her husband and her mother-in-law tried to prepare her, and she just thought they were kind of teasing, or she didn't really think that it was going to be like an actual outhouse. And then when she got there and saw it, it was kind of like, oh no, like this is actually, this is what the conditions are. Like this is what we're doing, and what I signed up for. And you can see where it hit her emotionally, what the circumstances were. So I am really excited to see what ends up coming out in all of the episodes. And there's so many things that I can't share with you yet because it hasn't been aired. So I will definitely do some follow-up episodes of the podcast as more of these episodes come out, with my experience. So if you have questions, regarding my experience, my role, those different things, or specific things that come out, when the episodes air, would love to see those, and we'll hopefully get to address them in some follow-up episodes. But all in all, it was a very incredible experience. The size of the production crew to do something for that long of a period of time, and having 3 different cabins and filming those, just the sheer size of the amount of people that it takes to pull something like that off, was really amazing to get to see. And I did get to travel some. I also have decided that I really do not like traveling. I really do not like flying. It feels like so much wasted time, waiting for flights and getting through security and all of that. The novelty of flying, I guess, definitely wore off. I ended up going 5 different times to location. I did have to fly in order to get there each time. And by the end of it, I'm like, oh, if I never see the airport again, that'll be just fine with me. But all in all, it went really well. And during that time, every single flight I had was delayed. So I think that added to it. I used to, as a little girl, I never flew at all. We didn't fly for family vacations. My dad has never flown commercially or anything like that. We didn't travel. So I remember the first time that I got to go on a flight to somewhere, like it was really exciting. I'm like, ooh, this is like a brand new thing. Was really exciting. And I don't really consider it that way anymore. Though I do like visiting other places. I just don't necessarily like the journey of getting there. So all in all, it was a very cool experience. I'm feel blessed that I got the opportunity, and there's things that I have to wait until episodes come out to be able to share more, which I am not a good secret keeper. But I have tried really hard to make sure that I have followed every line of my contract and not spoil anything. So I will just stop there. But it has been a long while since I've actually had a solo episode where I've just got to share with you guys, what's been going on in our lives, to get to share this part of it with you. And I've missed you guys, which sounds kind of weird because this is me just talking into a camera or a microphone. If you're listening to this podcast on the not via video, not on YouTube, but just, I usually listen to podcasts on my phone just through a podcast app. I don't normally watch video versions of podcasts. But I love getting messages from you guys and reading your comments and getting your feedback and those types of things. And so I have been looking forward to getting to share this with you, even though it feels like it's been a long time coming. So for our verse of the week, I typically do verses of the weeks on the solo episodes. I picked 1 Peter chapter 4 and verse 8. This is the NIV translation of the Bible. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling, which is technically verse 9. So it was 1 Peter 4, 8, and 9. And we have been doing a series, or I should say my pastor has been doing a series of preaching at Cowboy Church, and it has been on love and diving into the different biblical aspects of love, loving one another. What does that look like? Last week it was on humility. And so I really wanted to share that verse specifically because love does cover over a multitude of sins. And of course, we have the biblical definition of love. Love does not envy. Love is not, I mean, you can, look up those verses and go through it. There's lots of scriptures that talk about love. But I wanted to share that because it is easy for us to get caught up in emotions on things, especially things that we care about. And it's really easy for us to get caught up in our zeal or our passion or our sense of justice or, input whatever it is. And it's easy for us to jump over the love part and to respond to people and to respond in situations that is anything but loving, but it's because we feel justified. And we can even feel justified by scripture. However, the greatest commandment is love and to love thy neighbor as thyself. And so if we really sit back, and this is for myself, and I've got to put this into practice quite a bit this last week, is what is a response of love? And am I looking at this situation and maybe at this person, if the situation involves a particular person, am I looking at them through the eyes that Jesus loved them and died for them the same as he did for me? And am I showing that in my response? Am I thinking of them in that manner and the situation? And I tell you what, when I look at it through that lens and I take a minute to pause because emotions want to just come right up into situations. That is the human part of us. But when I really take that moment to sit and to look at them through the lens that Jesus loved them and died for them, knowing full well what they would do in life, knowing full well what sins they would commit, the same as he knew what sins I will commit and have committed and will in the future. He died for them the exact same that he did for me. And they are made in his image, same as I. When I look at it with that lens first, before I respond, wow. And then take it to prayer. Sincerely, not like, Lord, heap coals upon their head. I don't mean like that. But I mean sincerely take it to prayer and then respond. It really makes a huge difference. So it's something that I personally am still working on, but I have gotten to use that quite a few times this past week. And I always feel that God always gives us a message just as we need it. And so the series that our pastor was starting to preach actually started a couple of weeks ago. And last Wednesday was actually the one on being humble in our response to people and with love. And wow, the Lord really knew that was a message I needed to hear and have front of mind as the next week would unfold. So maybe it will serve you too. Maybe it's a reminder, but I always feel like when God has put something like that on our heart that is especially touched us and had big impact in the way that we deal with situations, then that's the words of our testimony. And when we share, hey, this really changed me, or this really changed the way that I approach this situation, and glory to God, then I think that's something we need to share with other people. We need to give testimony about that. So that is what I just did. I hope that helps somebody if you're walking through a time. And I thank you for joining me on this sincerely. So next week, we'll be back with another brand new episode. Blessings in mason jars for now, my friends.